They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Hello, everyone listening. This is our second episode of our show, and I'm excited to be here. We watched the Transfiguration.
I'm very excited.
We feel like we... He is. I can attest to that. Last time we sort of set up what the show was about, and I feel like we covered that already, and we don't want to talk about it every time. But there's one thing we didn't mention. You mentioned to me off recording that I thought was worth mentioning, which as far as like why horror movies for you, why you're interested in them. And I forget now what you said, but it wasn't...
I don't remember what I said at all.
But in person, you talked about the search.
Oh, the search in terms of like looking for the reason why things in horror work or don't work.
Yeah, and just how it was fun how you talked about it, where with horror movies, there's like, you're always feeling like you're looking for the buried treasure.
Oh, right. Yes, this is very true. I feel as though I'm trying to find a movie that evokes the same feeling that I had when I was first kind of introduced to horror films. And so obviously that's an adolescent version of how you're responding to it because you're young and fresh and whatever and not jaded or bitter or whatever maybe you are now. But finding the thing that like sits with you and actually, you watch a thing and you actually get freaked out by it, whatever that means. I almost never at this point find a horror film that makes me have that feeling again. I mean, as a kid, it was like The Shining, like freaked me right out, but I probably watched it when I was too young. But trying to recapture that feeling
you feel too safe now. Yeah,
I mean, it's virtually impossible.
For me, like the theater experience can help do that for like the best of the best ones, like The Shining.
That's interesting.
Always works. Alien, just Texas Chainsaw is like one of my favorite movie going experiences.
I don't know that I've seen a lot of horror in the theater.
It makes a difference, I think, that big screen, not being able to go anywhere, just sort of like almost how you said, just me being here watching the movies and you not, actually watching them even helps.
The horror for me of going to the movie theater is sitting around people who have no theater etiquette.
Right.
Like I could go on and on.
Well, let's not though, because
it's the worst.
We'll talk about that because we're going to see movies. So far, the second episode was another Netflix viewing, but we plan to see some new releases in theaters too. So we'll be sure to hear about Tim's adventures in movie theaters.
There's so many.
All right. Well, you want to do something we want to do as sort of an intro for each episode too, which is
what scares us.
What scares us, which we thought maybe we might run out of that. So things that have scared us, moments in our life we've been terrified.
Yeah.
Start us off on the right.
I have one that I don't know if I have a specific moment that like spurred this on, but I do not like things with like insects or spiders and stuff like that. I just don't like them. I don't like bugs. I don't like creepy crawlies. Can you think of an instance where you got one on your face or you found one or? No. Which is kind of weird, right? Like, we had a book when I was a kid called Be Nice to Spiders. Mm-hmm. And so I had, like, an intellectual appreciation for them, but don't get them near me.
That's similar to the first thing that came to mind for mine. What I can share is another thing from my youth was I remember I was so excited to be at the beach one time as a kid. And I remember running right up to the water and like sinking my hands into the wet, just when the tide was going down on the wave and like picking up some wet sand. But like somehow it was miraculous, just the chances of this. But right in like my palms of my hand were one of those like prehistoric looking like big bug, like I don't know what they call them.
I'm terrified like to even know what
roly-poly shell things with just the like tons of like little legs on the side. I just screamed and like tossed it back and then ran back up.
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know what it is I don't know why they freak me out so much. They're like, I don't want them on me.
How about Transfiguration?
Yeah. Interesting. Transfiguration.
Have you been hurting any animals?
Maybe thinking, but I don't do it. Not anymore.
Wow, you're really into
Vampires.
I was gonna say scary movies.
So you heard, huh?
No.
Someone killed a white boy in the basement.
So what are vampires like?
I think it starts with drinking blood. Like you have a need to. Eventually that's not good enough. So you switch to animals and people.
Can you give us a let's do a summary of the film?
Oh, okay. I can do this. Hang on. Let me think about it for a second. How old is he? Again, we have this issue.
I read it. He's 14.
Okay, so a 14-year-old, I guess, urban city kid. I think it takes place in it's in New York, but I'm not sure if it's like in a borough or if it's in Manhattan. It's a little vague.
I don't know.
It looked like Stuyvesant Town, like they're sort of I don't want to call them projects per se, but they're sort of that setup of like, Stuytown. Stuytown is like,
quick summary
5 high
here.
rises. Oh, okay. So quick summary. So Milo is a 14-year-old who lives in New York City and believes that he's a vampire and is learning and teaching himself how to accomplish that. And, he's planning out his kills. Right.
And it's cool. And I'd say like he's planning something bigger, or we know there's a sense of like he has a next step coming in his life, which sort of ties into it is also a like coming of age film, like a teenage age film.
I kept thinking to myself, what is the significance of the title? And I think we'll get to that. Cool. Maybe.
Yeah, so we're in the things that worked for us section here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm.
What worked? What worked for you?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I have a list here. I liked it overall. Yeah, I really liked it. It's just the hesitation is when I maybe just didn't love it, but I thought it was great. The opening, how it just started with him immediately, like the first shots almost were him sucking blood from the guy in the bathroom stall.
Right.
I loved that so much because it was just sort of like, okay, yeah, so like all the parts in vampire movies where they're getting their powers or figuring out or turning into a vampire, like whatever got him to that moment, we just sort of played catch up on, which I thought was so smart to just skip past all this stuff that we've seen a million times.
Yeah, it's like we didn't need to see his origin.
Yeah, exactly. We picked it up and I thought it was fun. We were paying attention to his notebooks that much more.
Yeah, I mean, they pretty much solve that by the next time we see him just in his room, just by observing what's in his room. Right away, you kind of go, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
He's got a shelf full of vampire movies of different sorts on VHS, and you sort of get just enough time to read a handful of them, and it's like Lost Boys, and I don't remember what else is there, but the standard sort of things that you associate with vampire movies.
Yeah, all the cult favorites too.
Right.
Yeah, I thought I'm going to use this word a lot. I just thought it was far more interesting
than what?
Than the other approach.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant as a movie it's far more interesting than other movies.
Okay, what about specific parts that you liked?
I in sort of the same vein, I quite liked the lore that they set up, where it's like there's nothing saying that vampires are in the mystic sense that they're a real thing in this world. It's all through his perception of the world. He says it at least 2 or 3 times, like vampires exist, but like, what is a vampire in his mind, right? Like he has a couple scenes where he's sort of tries to identify what that is, but he himself isn't really sure. So that's just vague kind of lore that in his mind, they exist.
Right.
So,
but yeah, or like is what he believes in like a literal, because he says like, oh, you know, vampires, real vampires, they can go out in the sun, they can blah, 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 blah. So he has this very, you know, this idea of what constitutes a vampire.
Yeah.
And that he happens to be one. And that was an interesting question was there. Does he just love them so much that he is one essentially? Or did his love of vampires make the urge, or does his urge, you know, support his love of vampires, or led to?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the question sort of maybe of the movie is him. I mean, I think he thinks he's a vampire. I don't actually know. I mean, it's an interesting setup because there's no one really in the movie to bounce it off of to give an answer.
Right. Well,
it's all his perspective.
Well, yeah, which is cool because he's portrayed as the expert. Like, he's so studious and knowledgeable in all of this.
Yeah, yeah.
Which it would have been fun to see him like with another, you know, vampire expert. But he was just, I like that those are just his character, which was fun. Right,
and the sounding board, his girlfriend, for lack of a better term.
I wrote the names down because I always forget names, Milo and Sophie.
That's right. Yeah, his sounding board, she's sort of just not reflecting, deflecting the question back at him. You know, she's like, yeah, but, you know, have you read Twilight?
Yeah.
And it's like, he's like, no, because vampires don't sparkle.
In the summary, you kind of started to get there. You mentioned your the urban setting. I liked that a lot.
Which is, you know, not necessarily where we've seen vampires in movies.
I mean, I feel like that's when you watch it, it's cool. I don't know if there's anything to explain about it, but just down to like the details of stuff that I liked about the setting was just like, and I think this is, you know, just because it was an indie horror film, but they just made it work of like the billboards and the signage and just sort of everything was just so, it was actually, you know, it was real life. It was real in that sense.
Yeah, and it's now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the future or the past. I think the only indication that it could be, that could sort of date it, is that they have flip phones.
Yeah. Well, I saw that more as
like people have flip phones.
No, yeah, people who aren't buying $800, $1,000 iPhones have flip phones. No, absolutely.
So it fit into the world. I quite liked the even though I sort of maybe made this sound like it was a negative thing, I like the slow burn pacing of it.
Mm-hmm. It made all the kills really work.
Right. And I mean, it does a really good job of saying, especially since they start it with a kill, saying, that's going to happen again. You have to sit and wait for it. And you have to wonder who it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads really well. I mean, I found myself at various moments being like, uh-oh, he's going to kill his brother. Uh-oh, he's going to kill his girlfriend. Uh-oh, he's going to kill the kid who bullied him in the beginning. You know, like, you keep thinking that everybody is the potential next kill, which is
that's the
great.
Sign of a good horror movie. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's that setup for anticipation is super effective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then it made it when he did pick his kill, even though it was mostly strangers, you still go, oh!
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I like that he had rules, that he's kind of coming up with them, like he's sitting in class when the teacher's talking about history.
He just doesn't care.
Like some random history note about, I don't even remember, it was like MacArthurism or something like that. It probably wasn't even that. But, you know, and he's just not paying attention. He's just writing his rules for the next kill, which is great.
He's doing his homework.
Yeah.
He's doing his schoolwork.
It's very clear what's important to him.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. He did it. The actors in it were all great again.
Yeah, I really liked the casting of Milo.
Mm-hmm.
He's super unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wondered, I was like, how much of this is just who that kid is in real life? Like, he's just sort of an awkward kid.
Well, you could tell, though, he's smart enough that he's aware of that in a way that's sympathetic versus off-putting, I thought, which we'll get to.
How do you mean? In that you as a viewer could tell that the actor was aware of
the
it?
character.
Okay. Yeah.
Like,
Right.
the character knows he's awkward or blah, blah, blah.
Yes, they actually make a really good point of sort of showing that he knows.
Yeah.
Because when he gets kind of harassed or like made fun of by a group of guys that live in his building, they call him freak. And he does a very awkward, like, hand gesture.
Yeah, I was just going to say his wave. I loved
Yeah.
that. It was kind of like this like poo-pooing, but also this like, hello.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I know you guys are going to call me freak, and I'll do a weird thing to sort of justify that you're calling me a
and
freak,
just
so
like,
you leave me alone.
haha, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, there he is. See, he's a freak. What's that weird hand thing?
Yeah, no, he was great and well cast. The girl, too.
Yeah, I
All
like
the
the
bit
girl.
parts.
I remember thinking the brother had a scene early on, and the first couple lines I was like, ooh, this guy is not good. And then like almost immediately he had a few more lines and I was like, oh no, I'm wrong. He's fine.
Yeah,
I don't know what it was about that one moment. I think it wasn't what I was expecting. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly I was like, oh no, he's cool. He's
Yeah,
cool.
I thought as sort of, I don't know, as simple as like the brother character was, they did a good job of making him realistic just through details gradually being revealed about their situation.
Yeah.
Oh, he used to be friends with the guys who are still ruffians,
Yeah.
but not anymore. We learn more about the mother. Just because we were talking about the kid's performance, and I have it next here. I don't know if this is so much a performance thing, but just something about his character was just his killing style. I put it as like, he has a signature move for his kills, which was, I guess, more is coming to mind as I say that, the knife and stuff, but I liked his signature move, the walk away, which was like how he would lure people, where like it felt like for so many kills, like he would you just see like him with his backpack, just kind of like, oh, I'm just walking over here now, and that just became like something just about this like non-aggressive like walk. I just loved like,
well, you know what's
kills coming.
What's really interesting, this just sort of occurred to me, what's interesting about that is that his demeanor and his walk is sort of classically defined as the victim's behavior.
Yeah.
You know, when people say if you're going to walk down the street at night, don't sort of like go inside yourself. Like you look like a target. You know, be confident, stand up straight, sort of walk with authority, like keep your head up, make sure you're looking around and you know, observing your surroundings, all of that stuff. But he sort of had this like
He's
slightly
unassuming.
Yeah, slightly shoulders hunched, like he's like trying to not be noticed.
Which then makes him the better killer. 'Cause
Exactly.
No one notices him.
It's
so
great.
that's what I loved about that.
Yeah.
Any other specifics you have? Things you liked, worked for you?
Well,
I got some more.
I don't know. We kind of covered the setting. I really liked the
I liked
setting.
the flashbacks of the mother's, like, I guess, death, where at first it was
Yeah.
just sort of like cutting, where he's like looking at the doorknob, and then like, you know, different color corrected shot
That's
of like
right,
him like looking at what we find out is the end of the mother's bed. But I thought it was just done in that way where it wasn't like super obvious at first, nor was it overdone. It like came back just the right amount of like one or two times.
Yeah.
And revealed it just that little bit more, and it was just enough to tell the story. I thought that was well done.
I think one of the things we can kind of elaborate on this, I think, as we go along the events of the movie, but the kind of overarching theme of the movie, I think, is, well, what I thought it was, is really interesting, because everybody in this movie is trying to escape something, right? And the kind of general escapism theme of the movie, in the face of loss, is quite compelling in a dramatic way. Like, it's emotionally compelling. Mm-hmm. It's not just like this movie. It made me feel like this movie was really well thought out. You know, like they cared, that they made an effort to have layers of actual human, you know, emotion and experience in a quote unquote genre, fantastical world, or at least
it's not a fantastical
it's
world.
not,
though,
but
this one,
it's a I guess it's a subject matter that
Right.
in other versions is always sort of like heightened fantasy or whatever, like magic or mysticism or whatever, vampires and all of that stuff. And this just strips all of that away. It's like, no, this is like, whether you like it or not, this is a real kid in a real world. Mm-hmm. And then the question of, well, does that mean that he's just made all of this stuff up about vampires because he's obsessed with it? Or is he a vampire? Mm-hmm. Like what is a vampire becomes kind of the even bigger question.
Right. That's what I was saying earlier, is where did that stem from in his history?
Yeah.
At what point did he become one? At what point did he know he was one?
Right. And I like his perspective on, which I think comes around to the end and sort of the climax of the movie, of him having an opinion that, like, I don't think you can kill, like, I don't think a vampire can kill himself. Right? And not so much even that he doesn't think vampires can't die, but that they can't kill themselves.
I was thinking about that too. I was wondering if that was more because of the personal thing with his mother.
I think it's directly related. Like, he's formed that opinion. I think what's really good about what they did with this movie is they took a traumatic event as sort of the impetus for all of his, his worldview is obviously shifted dramatically by the death of his mother. And in this particular case, he latches on to something that's pretty extreme of vampirism.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not he was into vampires before then is not clear. But as he finds his mom dead, and we learn sort of third act-wise that he decided to taste her blood, as she's dead on her bed, the thing he decides to do is go over and taste the blood of the cut on her wrist that she's and that she's killed herself. So that's important, right?
Yeah.
Like, his view, his opinion of these things, of death, of who he is, of whether or not he can kill himself, are very clearly, specifically related to that moment.
Mm-hmm. Which was an excellent moment. I should put that. Things that worked for me. That was a big, good scene or reveal.
And I remember thinking, I don't really want him to do that.
Which is what you want from watching these movies.
Yeah,
yes.
for sure.
The mother's death. I guess, if we're talking about sort of deaths towards the ending, or reveals toward the ending, moments toward the ending, I liked how they went for it with the kid kill, where, remember, he breaks into the more well-off people's apartment, like the drunk guy with the daughter, and sees the little daughter who just looks at him, goes and knifes her, and then same with the father.
Did you have a problem with, I guess we could put this in things we didn't like, but I ultimately was fine with it, but I did remember, I remember thinking, why didn't she scream?
She, that didn't bother me. I don't know if something about the moment played out.
It seemed fine, but it just was.
I feel like she saw him as a kid and almost like wanted to trust him.
That's a really good point.
But sorry, what I was gonna say about that, rather than just sounding like, oh, I love it when they killed the kid, was it actually? Yeah, what did I say? That it ruled out any doubt if he was like actually sort of a monster or not.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it was such a horrific, act that was like, he is a monster. But that in such a way where when he kills himself at the end, essentially, in a roundabout way, it's like, it works because it sets up, oh, he's smart, he knows he's a monster, we know he's a monster, we can almost sympathize with him killing himself in that sense.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, but then that's why it was such a good ending, as far as like bringing up those questions of like, is suicide still a bad thing in this case? Which is a question I love and am also working on.
Well, and I think this is what, for me, the title means. The transfiguration that he goes through is sort of understanding that he is a monster, and then oh man, how do I even explain this? I think it's him learning and accepting that he's a monster and that he needs to not exist as a monster. Like, that's a pretty high plane of understanding, right? And as a kid, like, at times I was like, this kid is almost too smart for his age.
You remember what it was like to be then? I don't know.
No, I sort of do,
at least
but
I
that's high thought.
No, I always felt like as a kid, like, you aren't a kid, you're a person. Like, I don't know. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for.
But that's real deep understanding of yourself and the world.
But if you're that introspective and it's all you're thinking about, and your mom died at that age,
yeah. No, I'm not trying to discredit him. I'm just saying that it's advanced.
Yeah.
It's advanced thought.
Well, it was sort of
to come around to that, which is good.
Yeah,
like,
I think it was just that there was the clear conflict in front of him, so it wasn't like he had to have the wit or the introspection to see that even as a possibility. He just saw it as something he had to decide.
Right, and like in, I think, a lot of movies and stories, it took essentially falling in love with somebody, even though that never really felt to me like a conflict for him, but with the girl, Sophie, but his actions definitely say, I want her to have a better life.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think that understanding of I guess, love or empathy for another person is the thing that motivates him to make this decision to not change, but to end his life as a monster.
You're right. I think it was that experiencing intimacy and like life for the first time, maybe like all the aspects of life before he'd want to check out, that allowed him to do that. Because my take from the beginning was like we were more supposed to get the sense that he was gonna like move to Transylvania or something like that,
Sure.
or just like live this sort of life of killing hobos or something.
Right.
But no, that you bring that up, and that's actually more interesting, where I wasn't taking into account that it was his affair, his romance with Sophie.
Well, and every other character is essentially a foil for that, right? Like his brother is despondent; he has no intimacy with his brother. Mm-hmm. He says at one point, she says, "Has anybody ever told you you don't say much or you don't talk much?" And he goes, "No, nobody talks to me."
Yeah,
it's like this kid has no connection with like somebody who is interested in him, other than people who are calling him freaks or beating him up, which is the opposite of intimacy.
Right.
So I think that really is the crux of this story, is that he learns what he learns what intimacy or some version of love is, and goes, oh, that changes my trajectory.
He goes through not a transformation, nay, but a transfiguration.
Right. What does that exactly mean? Like, what's the difference in definition? Transfiguration?
I don't know.
We should look it up.
Yeah.
But I think this is, it's a testament to really good writing and good storytelling. Mm-hmm. It just makes, even if that stuff is not something that you're intellectually walking away going, oh, it was this, I think the sentiment, it sticks with you at least on some level.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of go, yeah, that's why this kid does what he does.
Or it raises, what I think it does, raises even more questions, or
right.
Unanswerable questions is what I'm a fan of. Of not having, it's like when people say, what is a movie trying to say? I'm like, well, if it had something to say, then you wouldn't make a movie out of it. You just say it.
Yeah.
Like it's exploring these really interesting human things and horror can just sort of dive into the deep end with that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about, and then all these great things you're talking about it, on a certain level of when it's thought out, a movie's thought out this much. I kind of already mentioned this, but like I love, I didn't see a clear ending coming.
Yeah. No, I didn't either.
And then that sort of tied into, another thing I really liked was the ambiguity of what he was doing with the police. And then that sort of, but then that paid off in the ending where it was like, oh, you remember you asked me, it's like, oh, did he just rat on them? Or like what? I mean, the specifics aside, we just know that in the end, he was just he had his master plan of leading to those guys shooting him. And this was
which you should, in a way, it's like we kind of should see that coming. Like he's clearly meticulous, right? Like he's marked out in a giant desk calendar every one of his kills. You know what I mean? He's got books and books of notes on vampires and drawings. Like he's obviously a meticulous.
But we're still
kid.
going though meticulous for what? And that's That's the ending that comes. His killing style, that was fun. And that's, exactly what you just said. I thought, and that it was a fun payoff, the ending that only came from a character who had that sort of planning and foresight. That was, like, you see in a heist movie or something where it's like, oh, I get it, because, this was their master plan all along. It was kind of fun to see that. In
there's a movie called, oh man, now it's going to escape me. It's like a Norwegian or Swedish film, and it's basically a heist film. And man, they do this perfectly, this moment of like he had it all planned out up at this certain point. And it is so satisfying when movies do that well.
Yeah. And then in this case, rather than a successful robbery of like, oh, it was all leading up to him finding a way to get shot.
Yeah. Pretty dark.
Yeah. I liked, I guess we sort of started with, I loved that it was like the self-aware vampire film of, but just at that level where, again, it had to fully embrace it rather than, it just doesn't feel like it sort of just offhandedly mentioned a few movies. Yeah. It was such an intrinsic and repeated refrain.
Yes.
Like
and he hangs the hat, not the hat, you know this term when you hang a lantern? Mm-hmm. He hangs a lantern on let the right one in almost immediately. Yeah. Right? Like, one of my first thoughts was, ooh, this is going to be sort of a lot like Let the Right One In, isn't it? And then 2 scenes later, he's talking to the girl and he's like, you know what movie I really like? Yeah. Let the Right One In. The original, not the American one. And, he's sort of going, we know that this is going to be similar in some, that we at least know that you, the audience, are going to think this could be similar, so we're going to call it.
Yeah, but rather than it being like, okay, I get it, the filmmaker's seen these movies, it was just so a part of his character. Right. This is how he views the world, is through these movies.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, it gives us it makes me feel like I'm in the world with them and that the world is real, which is good. Like, it's not, sometimes you want it to be something else, but in this particular case, with this setup, being that this movie is now in the real world, making sure you're not doing like what Walking Dead does and says like, well, the word zombie doesn't exist, even though this is a zombie, comic book and show. Yeah, you're like, we have a great word for it, by the way. Yeah. We could just call them that. Right. They're not like dodging this very obvious thing. They're just being like, that's the world. Yeah. We're cool with it.
It's all, I really liked it. Those are all the specific things I had for what worked for me. Do you have anything else before we move to things that didn't work?
The only sort of general thing is I like the look. I like the tone. It seemed to me like it was shot possibly, it almost felt like it could have been shot on like a Canon 5D. All of the external shots are clearly not like lit. They're just natural light. Even at night. And you get some pretty grainy shots at night, but because of the environment and because of the tone that's set up for this movie, it's fine. It works totally perfectly well for me.
I agree with you.
Cool.
Which then could transition us to things that didn't work for us.
That's a segue.
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
Good segue.
Which for good movies like this, things that didn't work for us, it's like, I feel like I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel almost. And the one thing I do have is exactly what you just said worked for you, which also worked for me, which is like the style, something about it, where I'm wrestling with myself when thinking about it, so I have no idea if this is how nitpicky this is, but where it's a section, let's address it.
Pick the nit.
Like, yeah, it was so effective, good filmmaking, cinematography, overall, but it also feels uninteresting to me in a certain way.
I get that. I agree.
It's sort of like, I feel like I talked to you about this, but like I liked a review for the recent movie The Disaster Artists, and comparing it to Ed Wood, where it was like, think about just how those are shot, where it's like Disaster Art is just like, it looks like an indie film, like that's a thing now. But like Ed Wood is like Tim Burton when in his sort of his prime, like really making a film, making every aspect of the film like work unto itself and be a part of itself. But then I start arguing against myself, where it's like, okay, but the whole aesthetic of this film is like low budget, urban, like this and that. But so it works. It works for it. But then like when every single scene is like starts with the wide, ends with the wide, and like, it's just the same thing. Yeah. I just am aware of it. I don't know.
I wouldn't say. And I remember I looked to see if the director was doing a couple things purposefully, and whether or not it would continue on throughout. For example, early on, I thought, ooh, I think that Milo is always center shot. And I started watching specifically, center shot just meaning that he's center of frame or ends up center of frame in every shot that he's in. And so I started watching to see if that were true, if that was a rule that they set for themselves in how they were going to depict him.
Times.
And I ultimately think the answer is no. And I started looking for whether or not they were if they made some sort of decisions as to how they're going to do those things and stick to them. It ultimately made me think that wasn't their goal.
Yeah, because it's a budget thing too. Like it totally still works great despite not being able to do everything that the babysitter did.
Right, but I never thought to myself, ooh, that's a really, really interesting shot, or that's a great shot, or they are doing this for this effect and good on them, that's great.
That makes you go, as I said, this is interesting, this is cool, this is something else, which then so you get what I'm saying.
I totally get what you're saying.
Totally crazy.
No,
anything that
not that I know
anything that didn't work for you aside,
let me look at what did I sound. This is a technical note, obviously, but and it only happened a couple times, and I think they just maybe they hit their stride halfway through the
when
movie.
Their Australian accent started becoming
No. There are a couple transition scenes where like whatever the soundscape that they had created, as the scene blacks out, the sound blacks out. It goes to no sound, and it is jarring.
That was a little awkward, I remember. I'm like, I noticed they're doing fade to blacks. That's risky. That's right. But they weren't the cleanest transitions.
They were not, and that it's just a technical thing. I think sound being one of the most impactful elements to take you out. If the sound isn't working, you are out.
Yeah. Actually, you just reminded me of like the one specific moment where I was taken out of it because of a sound thing. I forget if it was like, there's this stock like dogs or cat sound or bird sound or something like that. That was used at one point, I want to say like around the last third or like the beginning of the last third of the film. Anyway.
It's a tough one, man. Yeah. I mean, and sometimes, again, that could be budget, that could just be time, like you can't sit in an editing bay for 2 years if you don't have the money to clean everything up.
Right, but you either, you hear it or you don't.
True.
When it comes to that.
Yeah. It just seemed, to me, I was waiting for it to happen again.
Uh-huh.
And I think it happened a couple times early on. And then I never noticed it being an issue again. Yeah. In fact, one thing they did soundscape-wise that I thought worked was that they, as the movie progressed, this sort of low rumble stuff, especially leading up to something bad, like they're using that device. And it was effective.
Simple, effective. Great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really simple thing. Like, just have some rumbling, that increases in intensity before a potential bad thing happens.
Simple isn't bad. It's done well, yeah.
And it worked totally fine, but when you, I guess, I don't know, when you miss it and have a, I don't want to call it a mistake, because who knows, maybe they did it on purpose. But when you have one of those moments that pulls you out, it pulls you out.
No jarring continuity errors this time around, Tim.
Okay, do you want to go into our special side segment called Cobweb Continuity? Tim's Cobweb Continuity. I only have one, and I'm not even sure it's legit.
Okay.
There's a scene where Milo is in Central Park, and he sits down next to a rock. And I thought to myself, I think I know it. I lived in New York City. I was like, I actually think I know exactly where he is. He's by that stream and that rock. I've been there. I know that. And then there's a cut to a different angle, and and this isn't just like a rock, like a stone on the ground. It's a boulder, like a glacial boulder sticking out of the ground, right? That he's leaning up against. The boulder's on the wrong side in one shot. Like, it's. If the continuity is correct,
they might have flipped. They might have done a mirror image of the shot.
Exactly. They either mirror imaged or they just set up somewhere else and put him kind of on the wrong side for camera.
And you regret ever watching the film because of it.
Exactly. No, it was not jarring enough for me to even really know if I was catching something. I was like, I think that's a mistake, but maybe it's not, and who cares?
So, like, all continuity errors not worth losing sleep over.
Not all. I'll let some of them slide.
Good. Oh, I hope this one does, because
it was brief. I mean, it was immediately followed up by him potentially killing a young kid. So I was like, I'm more interested.
Oh yeah, that was a good almost kill. I liked that. All right, how about next section, things of note?
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Dude, when he kills the drunk dude and his daughter, he doesn't wear gloves or anything, man. His fingerprints are all over that scene.
Yeah, but he's about to kill himself. Doesn't matter. Which is why it's not a thing that took you out of it. It was just an interesting thing.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought to myself, your fingerprints, man.
Yeah.
Shit.
But, right, I think I thought that too during it. But again, I didn't have it in my things that didn't work for me section.
No. It was fine.
He's just covering his tracks and he's about to kill himself.
Yeah, it pays off.
Honestly, that was so nice to just not waste any time with, like... any of the, okay, how's he going to cover his, the police found this,
Right. Well, and as a writer, too, like, sometimes I think you can go down a rabbit hole of trying to fill every potential plot hole. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, when do you stop? Mm-hmm. Like, it's never ending. I mean, I'm writing a script right now where we're finding things and I'm like, who gives a shit at this point? Is it important? Sure, yes, somebody's going to go...
in its larger context.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it's solved, it can be solved just by the story moving forward.
Because even realistic films are films.
Yeah.
Which that word realistic brings me to a thing of note. My favorite thing of note for this film was his repeated frame of the word realistic.
Oh, that's right.
Which was like... That film, I like the vampire films that are more realistic.
Yeah.
And then it like kept going, the Twilights, it's not realistic at all, blah, blah, blah. But then it came back, his note at the end when it was like, you think he's dead. And it was like, and it was something I was endearing about him too, was just like with his fandom coming out. Not realistic. I like the realistic movies. And then in his note at the end, when you hear his voice comes on when he's reading it. And he's like, I read Twilight, not realistic at all.
It's great.
Like, that was funny.
Yeah.
I just noticed that the brother, like, I think he never left the couch, it felt like, at least. I'm sure he did, but all he was ever doing was watching TV, right?
Yes.
Did he ever leave the house?
He's... I thought he did at one point, but maybe not. He definitely got up from the couch like twice.
Oh, right. But all you picture when you picture, like, all right, the brother in the Transfiguration, you'd picture him sitting on the couch watching TV.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Well, and this is why it sort of comes back around to what I was saying about the escapism thing. Like, we learned that not only did this dude and his little brother lose both of their parents, but he was also a vet. Like, he was in... I can't remember if they said Iraq or Afghanistan.
Right.
And the second they say that, you go, oh, yeah, he's not just a deadbeat, like, jerk of a brother. He's, like, suffering.
Yeah, he went to war.
He's sitting on the couch, can't do anything watching TV, because that's probably the limit of what he can take in right now. And he's got to look after his little brother and has no parents and... probably doesn't, I guess, doesn't have a job. Like, he doesn't, I don't know what the ins and outs of coming back from war, of whether or not you have an income or something. But, like, that's what he can do.
Again, it worked, not a good or bad thing, but it's just like, it's funny to imagine, like, the fan art and it's just the brother sitting on the couch.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I kept thinking that there was going to be more of a tropiness to the brother. Like, Milo was going to come home and he was, the brother's going to be doing, like, I don't know, like doing drugs, like that's his problem, or he's an alcoholic, or he's a drug addict, or, I don't know what else the tropiness there could be, but like, why is he just sitting on the couch? And once you get that information, it's totally... it's satisfying and effective.
The last thing that I wanted to note was a cameo, which I didn't recognize at the time, but, in researching afterwards, the hobo, I'm pretty sure it was the one that he kills and he has a moment with, was Lloyd Kaufman of Troma film fame.
Whoa.
Famed producer, director. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So,
awesome.
If anyone's listening and wants to do a screen grab, we'd love to see it. It's cool. Lloyd Kaufman. Because when I Googled it, just Lloyd Kaufman, The Transfiguration, there was no still from it. And I think it's something we should have because props to him. And that's I think that's a really fun.
That's crazy.
He's like the spiritual godfather for indie horror, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
So...
Yeah,
so
a very
George
specific...
I mean, so many. There's
his specific sort of realm of
the factory
indie horror
mentality that he almost, and the enabling other directors is pretty unique to him.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And when I looked up in the credits, like, wait, who was he? Is this hobo? So, and then thinking back about the scene from what I remember, I'm like, oh yeah, I thought he kind of like looked familiar or something.
That's cool.
Cool.
I have one more thing of note. And the reason it's a thing of note is because I'm not sure this is true. But I think that Milo's shirts, as the movie progresses, man, that sounded weird. I believe that his shirt color goes from dark to light.
Oh, right. And remember, that would tie in with, at the ending, how he's like, I've been drawing suns a lot lately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of this subtle, symbolic thing to
the sun's
just
coming up and kills the vampire at the end.
Right.
That's why.
Yeah,
Great.
Exactly. Which is so cool.
Yeah. Let us know if that's true too. That's curious. That's a nice touch.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for today, unless you have anything else.
What else could we talk about?
Man. I feel covered. I feel good.
Yeah, well, I guess we should rate this in some form or another.
Yeah. Yeah, we're trying to figure out our rating system here in our early episodes. And we're leaning toward having like three tiers versus a simple thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah. And not so complex that it's like I give it 1 3/4 stars.
Yeah.
It's like, who gives a shit?
So there's, I mean, we were talking about like loving it to the extent of wanting to see it again.
Yeah.
Is sort of the highest. And then I don't know, is recommending it, would that be there or just under it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that if you want to be really simplistic about it, it's like the highest praise being we would watch it again.
Yeah.
And then the next thing simplistically would be like, yeah, it's a movie and you can watch it. Mm-hmm. And that's it, right? And then thirdly being, this was like we want to avoid saying that it was bad or it sucked necessarily, because horror, it could be bad and you should still see it
or you still enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to call it bad,
right? Which is why this may take us some time. I don't know. It's hard for me because for the Transfiguration, I want to rate it exactly between the highest tier and the next tier. Where I feel like I would probably watch it again, but it's not necessarily something I'd seek out.
That's interesting. I don't think I would watch it again necessarily.
Well,
but I think it's worth seeing.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth seeing. I thought it was very, very good.
Yeah. We'll think of something.
All right. So my rating for this episode, it was very, very good.
Very good. My rating is...
Or actually, I also want to say very good. That's a lot of varies.
Do 3 varies, and then a word that means good, but isn't good.
Those very, very, very enjoyable.
Oh, fair enough. I'd say it's totally worth watching.
Great.
But it's a slow burn, so buckle in. That's my rating.
All right. Well, until next time, folks, this is Ryan.
Yes, this is Tim. Oh, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Tim Aslin.
And my handles you can get to through my website, ryanmcduffie.com, MCDUFFIE.
And someday we'll, have a website or something.
Well,
or I don't know.
I think we should have one by the time this comes on.
There you go.
Great.
Oh, things to strive for.
All right. Let's talk about that now, Tim. All right. Well, we wish the best to you all. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.